Thank you, Senator. I'll respond to the question, but let me begin with something in the category of you can't make this stuff up. Today, while we've been debating whether a president can be impeached for essentially bogus claims of privilege for attempting to use the courts to cover up misconduct, the Justice Department, in resisting House subpoenas, is in court today and was asked, well, if the Congress can't come to the court to enforce its subpoenas, because as we know, they're in here arguing Congress must go to court to enforce its subpoenas, but they're in the court saying, Congress, thou shalt not do that. So the judge says, if the Congress can't enforce its subpoenas in court, then what remedy is there? And the Justice Department lawyer's response is impeachment. Impeachment. You can't make this up. I mean, what more evidence do we need of the bad faith of this effort to cover up? I said the other day they're in this court making this argument, they're down the street making the other argument. I didn't think they'd make it on the same day. But that's exactly what's going on. Now, in response to the question about how does this aid different, this hold different from other holds, it's certainly appropriate to ask that question. The laws Congress passed authorizing this appropriation did not allow for the hold by this president, and as the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, found, it violated the law to hold the aid the way it did. Once the Department of Defense, in consultation with the Department of State, certified that Ukraine had met the anti-corruption benchmarks required under the law, there was nothing that would allow for a hold. The money had to flow. And that was intentional. Military assistance to Ukraine is critical to our national security. It has overwhelming bipartisan support. And recall that in the spring of 2019, the Defense Department certified Ukraine had met all of the anti-corruption benchmarks. The Department of State sent the Senate a letter saying that the benchmarks had been met. It issued a press release saying that the aid was moving forward. It began to spend the funds to help Ukraine. But then the president stepped in. Without legal authority, he secretly placed a hold on the aid. Now, the President's counsel in their presentation gives specific examples of past holds, as if we cannot distinguish one for a corrupt reason and one that is for a policy reason. In many of their examples, the law explicitly provided the executive branch the authority to pause, reevaluate, or cancel foreign aid programs as the situation in a recipient country evolved. For example, with regard to foreign assistance to El Salvador, Honduras, or Guatemala, the law explicitly allows the Secretary of State to, quote, suspend in whole or in part that assistance if at any time the Secretary deems that, quote, sufficient progress has not been made by a central government on a host of priorities, from respecting human rights to upholding the law. Those are the priorities that you, the Senate, agreed to, and the President was required to implement them. Similarly, aid to Afghanistan is subject to periodic reevaluations by law, and the law explicitly directs the Secretary of State should, quote, suspend assistance for the government of Afghanistan should it be assessed that the Afghan government is, quote, failing to make measurable progress in meeting certain anti-corruption, human rights, and counterterrorism benchmarks. The overthrow of the democratically elected government in Egypt, we've had that brought up as another example. Members of this body, including Senators McCain, Leahy, and Graham, pressed the Obama administration to suspend military aid. It wasn't hidden from the Senate. It was urged on the administration by the Senate. Senators pressed for that aid to be withheld because the law was clear in instances of a military coup, aid must be suspended. Senators McCain and Graham wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, not all coups are created equal, but a coup is still a coup. Morsi, that's the deposed leader of Egypt, quote, was elected by a majority of voters, and U.S. law requires the suspension of foreign assistance. I could go on with examples. No one has suggested you can't condition aid. But I would hope that we would all agree that you can't condition aid for a corrupt purpose, to try to get a foreign power to cheat in your election. Now, counsel says that if you decide the prosecution has proved that he engaged in this corrupt scheme, if you decide as impartial jurors that the Constitution requires his removal from office, that the public will not accept your judgment. I have more confidence in the
Thank you,
American
Mr.
people.
Manager.